Several million people have come over the border. I have 55 miles of the border. It includes some very dangerous areas to cross, desert and so on, and yet we have thousands and thousands coming every month. They come into San Diego. Now, California is a sanctuary state, so the entire state is welcoming to them. And yet more than 80% of them, when asked, will tell you where they're going, and it's not California. They are, in fact, going to Miami and other locations. So if the fact is that they generally have family or relatives, they know roughly where they're going, realistically, is there anything wrong with sanctuary cities and sanctuary states being expected to take substantially all of these people that they've said are welcome, and the non-sanctuary states having a reasonable right to be less welcoming?
What I would tell you is that the situation along the border, it defies reality to the extent in the numbers that you're seeing that places like
in my area, they know it's reality.
Yeah.
My Hispanic community that live along the border are absolutely beyond belief. They just don't know what else to do because it represents people they would love to help, but there's just too many of them.
And so the busing situation, it's a necessity. It's a necessity from those along the border. There is no more capacity. And so when you talk about New York City, who's got a population of 9 million, and yes, they have to now, address an illegal alien population. What about communities in South Texas of 15,000, 20,000? When they get 15,000 illegal migrants, almost a week in some instances. And so the busing, at least in my view, again, I'm not talking to Governor Abbott and others, it's a necessity because of a capacity issue, because of the overwhelming numbers that are coming across.
Now, you contrasted earlier the difference between the previous administration and this administration in the sheer numbers, with no explanation of an event that would have changed it other than a change in policy. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it's a change in a number of policies.
Okay, a change in a number of policies. So suffice to say that if we, all of us, all three of you, say that we are bringing in more people in a way that is not helpful and more than what Congress has authorized, which is about 1.4 million a year, if that's not the case, then by any stretch of the imagination, shouldn't we, and this is the Foreign Affairs Committee, shouldn't we in fact be working with other countries to either hold these individuals so they can be more orderly brought in if appropriate, or in fact be part of helping discourage their immigration? And isn't that really what's absent right now, is any kind of discouragement?
Well, we certainly talked earlier about it's a shared responsibility. It's not just a U.S. responsibility, Mexico, Central America, and South America, and others. So yes, I would certainly agree that I would say that our partners need to do more, but they need to see that the U.S. is doing more, and they don't currently see that.
Well, now, let me just ask one question, and all of you can answer this because I think it's known by all of you. Isn't it true that international law, if you want to claim refugee status or asylum, in fact requires that you make it at the first safe location after leaving the country or the region, and that in fact, with the exception of Mexico and Canada, virtually all of the people coming to our shores have in fact passed through intervening countries without making application?
It's a well-established practice that you need to seek safety in the closest third country, as you can to your home country. This idea that you're going to forum shop, that you're going to transit 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different safe countries because you prefer the United States, not because you need protection from persecution or something else. If that's truly the case, you're going to seek safety in the closest place imaginable.
I prefer first class, but I sit in coach because that's the seat that I purchased. Mr. Chairman, there's no question at all that you've done a good job today with witnesses of establishing that this is a policy decision that could be reversed, should be reversed, and that the President is ultimately responsible for a policy that has led America, including our major cities, in turmoil. I thank you for holding this hearing and yield back.
Yeah, I think the chairman to chairman, I think that we would like to get this in our national security supplemental bill and I've talked to the Senate about it. If we could get this in that supplemental bill, it would make such a difference. So thank you for your kind words. Chair recognizes Mr. Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I first want to start out, I have this whole list of questions that I was wanting to ask the witnesses, but I first want to address some of the idiocy of those who are in this committee who actually were making statements that couldn't be further from the truth. You know, we hear all the time, and Mr. Hamilton, I have to agree with you tremendously on what you're talking about with regards to opportunist. And I also want to thank you for finally doing what we, and most of us in this committee has done, which is recognizing that China is an adversary, not an actual competitor. So let me just address a few things. Let's talk about opportunism. Many are saying that they're coming to America because they are scared of the violent crimes that are occurring in their cities, that they are feeling as if they are unwelcome, or that they're somehow looking at the criminality rates in their country and saying that, well, we have to escape for the following reasons, and that's why we should seek asylum. But let's point out some facts here. We had, just by the CBP's leaked document of October 23, they said we have 6,386 Afghanis, 3,153 Egyptians, 659 Iranians, 123 Iraqis, 185 Jordanians, 164 Lebanese, 24,000 Chinese, 15,594 Mauritanians, 1,613 Pakistanis, 538 Syrians, 30,830 Turkish, 13,624 Uzbek, 139 from Yemen. That is a lot of countries that they would have to have skipped in order to try and seek asylum that would have actually been able to house them for fears of criminality. But let's go back to one of the numbers. 1,613 Pakistanis. Well, it's interesting because if you look at the homicide murder rate in Pakistan and it's 3.98%, I can look at the city of Chicago, which is 29.6%. That's actually more dangerous. Maybe there should be people who are actually trying to exfil out to Islamabad. And I also want to point out the fact that they continue to try and talk about kids in cages. And Mr. Isaacson, you were very proud and kind of almost in a smirkish way was saying, well, Trump was doing this. Does that not continue to go under the Obama and Biden administration where there is a separation of children from the unaccompanied minors or a detention?
What we saw under Obama, yeah. I'll tell you, I went to the processing center.
But you didn't say Obama there, right? You were proud to smirk in front of my colleague, Mr. Connolly, who likes to, and I'm still hoping that he'll seek treatment for his Trump derangement syndrome. But my whole thing is that we continue to see the same thing where one wants to come in and play as if this is a partisan tool. But let's talk about partisanship because we're all talking about remain in Mexico, right? The illegality, as they're trying to claim. The only thing that's illegal right now is the way that this administration is handling things. But our liberal colleagues in Congress want to pretend that the Trump administration's implementation of MPP was some recent lawless, irrational invention of the prior administration. But the truth is that the legal foundation of MPP has actually been on the books since the Clinton administration. Mr. Hamilton, you've dealt with the legalities of this. Could you speak to the fact of whether or not that is a true or incorrect statement?
That is an absolutely true statement, 100%. The Congress dealt with that on a bipartisan basis. And in fact, I don't have the vote count on the top of my head, but it was a bipartisan vote of massive support for IRA and its passage. So the notion that, this is some kind of conservative conspiracy and this is intended to be harmful to people of certain backgrounds and things, just nothing could be farther from the truth.
Well, and I'll tell you what's interesting. My colleagues on the left continue to want to say that border walls don't work, but we saw how quickly Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats put a border wall around the Capitol, right? But they don't work. Let's just go ahead and put it that way. Secretary Wolf, you've been taking hits left and right because you actually believe in keeping our nation secure. And I would argue that whether it was trying to make Title 42 something that we could keep in place as a permanent codified law, whether it is to replace or put back in place the Remain in Mexico agreement, that we were far safer and that our numbers were lower. But let's just look at statistics. In 2018, you had the drug cartels that were making around $500 million a year. A lot of money. Fast forward to 2021 under Joe Biden, it's around $13 billion, of which 40+% in what? Child and human sex trafficking. But yet they want to talk about the inhumanity, if you will, The same people who won't refer to Chinese as competitors, or sorry, as adversaries, who are grossly inhumane in the way that they treat Uyghur. So it's just funny to me that we continue to hear this partisan rhetoric and nonsense from the people who want to say, well, we're shipping people illegally to the sanctuary cities. Well, isn't that exactly what you were asking for? Didn't you say that we are a sanctuary city that's welcoming? Which law? They want to say that was illegal to transport them. No, it was illegal when they came here. And I'll say one more thing. We are, in fact, a nation of immigrants, a nation of legal migration. And I will tell you right now that I would love to not just see remain in Mexico, Title 42, build our border wall, have a early detection awareness that is a cyber and a ISR capability, increase our CBP's strengths, be able to allow ICE to deport those who are actually there, stop the subsidies that is going to illegals, which would allow them to self-deport, and actually protect and realize that we're elected by Americans, not by the illegals who continue to violate our sovereignty. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Last but not least, I appreciate y'all's patience. Mr. Lawler from New York.
Thank you, Chairman. We have a migrant crisis in this country, one that has exploded under the current administration. Just under 10 million migrants have crossed our southern border since Joe Biden took office. Now, as a New Yorker, I understand full well that we are a nation of immigrants. My great-grandparents came through Ellis Island. My wife is an immigrant. I've been through this process. It is a fundamentally broken system. We must secure the border. We must stop this massive influx of illegal immigration, human trafficking, fentanyl trafficking, fentanyl pouring into our communities, killing 70,000 Americans last year alone. And people are upset because the governor of a southern border state, which has been overrun for decades, had the temerity to transport migrants up to New York. Joe Biden was flying migrants into my district, Westchester County Airport, on midnight flights, secret flights nobody was supposed to know about, long before Governor Abbott started sending anyone to New York. My Democratic colleagues in New York didn't have boo to say about it. Why? Because they didn't care, because it didn't impact them. They say we're a sanctuary state and a sanctuary city. They use billions in taxpayer funds to provide free housing, free health care, free education, free food, free clothing for undocumented migrants. And now, because it has impacted them, they are complaining. The mayor of New York City, after saying we welcome them, in fact, going to the Port Authority bus terminal to welcome them, now says this crisis is destroying New York City. Now says that we need to cut the NYPD budget at a time when crime is still at record highs. This is an absolute disgrace. This problem can be solved very simply. Secure the damn border. Increase border personnel. Increase court personnel to hear these asylum cases expeditiously. These asylum cases are taking 2 to 3 years to be heard at a minimum, and nearly 2/3 of them are rejected when they are heard because poverty in and of itself is not a prerequisite for asylum. It is tragic. We need to work with our allies in the Western Hemisphere to address many of the challenges. You see the crisis in Venezuela. You see the crisis in Haiti. These are real challenges that we have to deal with. But just leaving our border wide open is not solving the problem. Now, I've heard for years, we have about 11.5 million undocumented immigrants in this country. Well, when you're adding 9.6 million immigrants who are here illegally, who are waiting for their asylum case to be heard, it's a lot more than an 11.5. We're talking upwards of over 20 million people who are here illegally. We have to deal with that. You're not rounding everybody up and kicking them out. We all know that. And anybody who suggests otherwise is full of crap. But we have to deal with this. And we have to deal with a legal immigration system that is fundamentally broken. These arbitrary caps that have been in place for decades. Immigration hasn't been reformed since 1986. I was born in 1986. This is a joke. We should be making immigration decisions based on our economic needs. We have a shortage of doctors, of nurses, of home health aides. Instead, we're saying, oh, if you're from this country, no, you've hit your cap. What? It's foolish. It makes no sense. So let's start with one fundamental truth, which is that under Joe Biden, nearly 10 million migrants have crossed our southern border. This administration has failed miserably, miserably to deal with the migrant crisis. And for Governor Hochul and Mayor Adams to act as though they're shocked and outraged when they enact policies like sanctuary cities, like refusal to cooperate with ICE, like using taxpayer money to pay for free housing, health care, and the like, give me a break. Let's secure the damn border. I yield back.
Trying to speak with one voice as Americans, but we all know, Secretary, as you know well, immigration's not easy, and that's why it's been hard to fix for so long. But I hope that eventually we can come together as a nation and fix this problem without the partisan rhetoric, because certain things do work. And I think what you did in the prior administration worked, regardless of who the president was. It was very effective. And so let's try to bring back the things that work, and things that don't work, then we don't have to do those. So I want to thank all of you for being here today and your patience. This has been a very, very long day, but I want to thank you so much. And some members may have questions in writing. And again, I want to thank you all. And with that, the committee stands adjourned.